Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. It is exactly 9:36 a.m. News and views right here on Salam Media. And if you were following Salam Media yesterday, you will know that I spoke to Bongani Baloyi regarding his his departure from ActionSA. I was shocked, horrified to say the least, because I, like many other South Africans, are looking at ActionSA as our savior. I hope so. So I was very, very disturbed by this difference or this irreconcilable difference between Bongani Baloyi and Herman Mashaba. He couldn't tell me outright what exactly the issue was yesterday. He kind of alluded to, issues around, he gets the sense that he hasn't been trusted enough, and Herman did not give him an outright reply to what he was guilty of having breached. So we left it at that, wished him luck for his future, and we now have Action South Africa to give us right of reply on that interview. We understand that Action South Africa, Herman Mashaba, the leader, obviously Herman Mashaba, and the party's former Gauteng leader Bongani Baloyi have exchanged accusations following the latter's resignation. Baloyi believes that Mashaba does not want to decentralize power and may have been threatened by his attempts to do so. Mashaba, on the other hand, believes Baloyi was motivated by self-interest and, I quote, hell-bent on going into a coalition with the ANC. To talk to us about this is Michael Beaumont, National Chairperson at ActionSA. A very good morning to you. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Julie. So Thank you. Yeah. And please, by the way, don't be disillusioned. ActionSA is still the alternative in South Africa, and we'll still continue to build that alternative.
We hope and pray so. We need a light at the end of the horizon. We need someone to trust. We need a party to take us forward. I can tell you right up front, and I'm sure you're aware of this. There's fear, there's disillusionment, and there's a real worry about elections 2024. So we're hoping that you are going to be taking us out of all of this. But then, of course, the big question is the coalitions. But I'm sure you want to respond to my opening statement.
Sure. So, I mean, we obviously watched the press conference, and, we saw a very different person to what we had experienced in the party. In other words, the individual had presented himself as somehow a savior of ActionSA. Everything that was good of ActionSA was of his making, apparently. And everything that was bad of ActionSA was other people's fault to blame. And I think what you saw in that press conference is largely the reason for the breakdown in the trust relationship. And that is Bongani appears to be an individual playing in a team sport, because politics is a team sport. There's a lot of people who are responsible for what is good and what needs to be fixed in ActionSA, and no single person should be able to take the credit in that particular regard. I think from our point of view, we note his departure. We don't have acrimony. We wish him all the best. We acknowledge that he is a credible and talented South African, and we thank him for his service. But at the end of the day, we need leaders in ActionSA who are aligned to our agenda, and we cannot afford to be indecisive when we deal with leaders who are not aligned to our agenda.
He couldn't tell me quite. I didn't follow the press conference. I had him on this very show yesterday. I interviewed him on the show. I missed the press conference. But having said that, I couldn't pin him down to give me the exact reason for why he has decided to leave ActionSA. He was very vague about it and indicated that Herman Mashaba himself couldn't tell him why there was this supposed irreconcilable difference between the two of them. Do you think it was something very personal between the two of them, or is it really party politics at play here?
No, look, it's certainly not personal in as much as interpersonal, trivial kind of issues. I think ActionSA is a very large political party, and we work with many people who we can have personal issues with, but professionally, we have to be able to work together. just like you do in a professional environment outside of politics. It's no different inside of politics. But I think the point is there became a difference of opinion in the running of the province, and that difference of opinion began to affect how effective our structures were in Gauteng in delivering the message of the alternative that you and I were speaking about when we started this interview. And we need to be clear about something from our point of view, Julie, and that is Gauteng is going to be it's going to be a big part of our election in 2024. We have the ability to lead a coalition and be the biggest party in a coalition in Gauteng. We are very well established here. And if we are going to remove the ANC from government in 2024, it's going to take a monumental campaign. And anything short of that is a problem. And if you have a relationship between the leader of the party and the chairperson of the province, where you can't address these problems because of the breakdown in the trust relationship, then you're going to have a problem in that campaign, and we can't accept that.
Okay, let's look at the reading between the lines and the issue around coalitions and the suggestion that perhaps Bongani Baloyi was engaging with the ANC behind the scenes, and this has caused the break between him and ActionSA. How much of truth is in that statement?
Oh, certainly. It's a big part of it. And I think this is particularly what soured Bongani Baloyi's attitude towards ActionSA. You will recall in October last year, Julie, ActionSA was having a very difficult time with our coalition partners. Johannesburg had just been lost, and you now had ANC governments returning to Johannesburg. And ActionSA Senate resolved that we must have conversations with all political parties in Gauteng so we can perceive of ourselves in this coalition environment. Those conversations took place. There was a proposal from the ANC that ActionSA would be given the support to govern in Tshwane. The ANC would then be supported in Johannesburg by ActionSA, and that somehow ActionSA would support the EFF in Ekurhuleni. And particularly that proposal related to Bongani Baloyi himself being the mayor of the city of Tshwane. And what has emerged is that he was very invested in that idea. But when the public poll that we were running, in which we asked South Africans what should we do, came back, and that poll said under no circumstances can ActionSA go into coalition with the ANC, and under no circumstances can we be culpable for an ANC government in Johannesburg or an EFF government in Ekurhuleni. And Herman Mashaba killed that proposal. From that day on, the relationship changed most fundamentally. And that is why I say Bongani Baloyi in many ways is an excellent and talented individual, but he's an individual. And at that point in time, if his interests are not aligned to that of the party, that's when the problems began.
Okay, elections 2024 is around the corner, and all the different parties are going to go out in full force. But the big issue here is coalitions. If we want to get the ANC, if we don't want them in power, we don't want them in power any longer. We need new leadership. We need new hope for this country. But what we've seen up to now is that coalitions are very problematic. What is going on? Is it people wanting, is it this fighting for power, everybody wanting to be in leadership roles? And if that is in fact the issue, then Michael, I'm very, very concerned, because then are we not just going to get rid of the ANC and then get a coalition party who are all infighting all of the time for power? And obviously that also then equates to finances. Are they vying for these powerful positions because they want to be in the pound seats so that they can call the shots, so that they too can then line their pockets at some stage? Because that's not what we want going forward. We don't want an ANC out of government and coalition parties coming in and then really lining and protecting their own interests.
So it's such a complex question, Julie, and I think a whole interview on itself, but do indulge me for a moment.
Sure.
That there are really two groupings in South Africa that will emerge in 2024, because 2024 is effectively a referendum on change. There is parties that are willing to align with the ANC and continue the direction of our country. And there are political parties that are willing to align together to provide an alternative. Strangely, you have two parties in the middle, that being the Democratic Alliance and the EFF, who appear to be fighting over the prospects of giving the ANC a majority in 2024, which is bizarre, given that both of those parties have been cultivated on the idea that they are in opposition to the ANC. But what I will say is that there is a grouping of parties I count ActionSA amongst them. I count the IFP, the Freedom Front Plus, the ACDP, and various others who are committed to working together. We commit to the principle that the ANC should not be allowed back into government, and certainly not with our support, and that we can collaborate to demonstrate to South Africans that coalitions can work. Because ultimately, the most important variable in coalitions are the leaders in those parties. We see in some parties like the Democratic Alliance, where personalities like Helen Zille are becoming toxic to the running of coalitions because of how they push a party agenda at the expense of the coalition and the residents. But ultimately, these parties understand that coalition means we all need to give, we all need to compromise, and we all need to make it work. And no, for these parties, it's not about positions. I think we're on record on many occasions sacrificing positions. ActionSA was willing to sacrifice multiple positions in Johannesburg to bring the Patriotic Alliance back in so that that coalition would survive. Willing to give up 2 out of our 3 MMCs, for example, because it's more important that we show that coalitions work. And I think there's an extent, Julie, to which coalitions are new. And there's always a kind of storming phase in the early days of something new, and then a norming. And I think we're entering that norming phase now, because a national election, we cannot see this level of instability playing out at the level of our economy. That would be disastrous.
Okay, I want to ask you about some other political issues. Do you have an update for us on the executive mayor of Tshwane yet to be elected? What's the situation there?
Well, I'm actually looking for updates now, but essentially the newly elected speaker has the prerogative of calling the council meeting to elect the mayor. It does not appear yet that a meeting has been called for tomorrow, and there's only about 10 minutes left for which that could be called. So it would probably seem early next week by the seams of things, but we're waiting to hear from the speaker in the city of Tshwane currently.
Okay, my first interview this morning was with Carl Niehaus regarding the national shutdown on Monday. And of course, he has formed an NPO, as you are well aware, called the African Radical Economic Transformation Alliance. And we all know that he's very, very, very pro-RET. He had some very, very strong views about the national shutdown and the stepping down of Cyril Ramaphosa from office. And he's saying that the national shutdown should go ahead. I put to him 2 questions, and the one being the cost to the country regarding the national shutdown. And I also asked about the issue around the protests becoming violent, because we see this happening time and time again. You have national protest action, and sadly, as much as the leaders do reassure us that there won't be damage to infrastructure, there won't be damage to property, it will be peaceful, it will be calm and peaceful, invariably some of them do end up being just that. He turned my questions on its head and told me that it's not what is costing the country more is having Ramaphosa and his cronies in power. So I shouldn't look at one day of protest action in isolation. That was his response to that question. And regarding to the issue around the protest turning violent or unruly, he suggested that that was propaganda against, the EFF and perhaps Areta, which is his party, and sympathizers to EFF and people like Areta. So your response to my question and his response to my questions to him.
Well, I think it's always important not to take Carl Niehaus too seriously from a starting point. But I think let us be explicit about something, that businesses and employed South Africans and unemployed South Africans are under an assault every single day. They are assaulted by continuous load shedding. They are assaulted by collapsing infrastructure. They're assaulted by the grey listing of this country and the spiraling cost of inflation. And the list just goes on and on. If we really have a problem with this government, which so many South Africans rightly do, the solution is not to continue to assault South Africans, business owners, the unemployed and the employed, by giving them more hardship. Because ultimately, Cyril Ramaphosa is not being punished by the national shutdown. Ordinary South Africans are being punished by this national shutdown. And we've spoken out against it. We are calling for South Africans to continue with their responsibilities and their work. And I think it's gravely irresponsible what is being done, but it's being done by people who, if we're very honest with ourselves, have policies that will amount to the destruction of our economy, hyperinflation, and enormous levels of unemployment. And I think from that perspective, what they're doing is irresponsible. And let's call another thing out. The EFF have been open and notorious about their intention for violent disruption to take place on Monday. This isn't being interpreted. It's not being deduced. It's actually in writing, in things that have been identified in their communication of this event, where they are warning businesses to shut down or else there will be looting or damage of property. That is a criminal entity that speaks like that to South African businesses. It cannot be tolerated. It cannot be excused. And South Africans should not tolerate that.
Okay, two more questions. The one being that there were threatening images of an EFF leader from Mpumalanga brandishing an automatic rifle on social media with the following post, and I quote, "By all means necessary or all possible, we are ready," unquote. That's very insightful, is it not? And very threatening.
It's an incendiary remark in a country that already has too much violence. 85 South Africans die in this country every single day violently. And this is something for which we should all hang our head in shame. To actually say that you are opposed to a government that is failing the people of South Africa when it comes to the fight against crime, and let's agree that's exactly what we have. You can't oppose that government by yourself, appearing in images like that and making statements like that, because then you aren't part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And I think that's exactly what that image said to South Africa.
Okay, now considering the experience and lessons learned from the July unrest, 2021, of course, and taking into account the threat to the state, the economy, and us as South Africans, what measures do you believe the South African police, or perhaps even the Defence Force, should have in place to mitigate any threats, any disasters, any unrest, civil unrest on a large scale for Monday? Because that is a possibility, is it not?
I mean, I suppose so. I always believe it's a possibility. I always like to tell myself that what happened in July is not something that could easily happen again, that it is a terrifying prospect that all South Africans live with that possibility. And I think from that point, the most important point of view is for the police to be engaging the leadership of the EFF right now, not on the day, but beforehand, and making sure they understand the extent to which they will be held criminally culpable for any of these kind of criminal activities that may take place on Monday, for the looting or damage to businesses, etc. And that ultimately those leaders of the EFF need to know that, so that pressure is applied on them now, that when they exercise their freedoms to gather, assemble, and protest on Monday, which are constitutionally defined freedoms, they do understand that there will be accountability for any of those forms of problematic behavior.
Okay, we also understand that the DA is going to be petitioning the court for an urgent interdict against the EFF regarding the national shutdown. I understand that ActionSA is also going to be joining forces on that urgent interdict. Am I correct in thinking that?
No, I think we are busy looking at papers at the moment. We haven't made any announcement to that effect, but we have come out publicly condemning this action and being available to hold people accountable in the event that what we fear may happen on Monday does in fact materialize on Monday as well.
Okay, and then finally, I know it's not your call, but just your thoughts on people like myself who are planning on coming to work, and a whole host more people, I suppose, in essential services like hospitals, SAP, etc. Are we going to be safe to be out on the road, riding, from home to the studio, etc.?
I think this is something we plan to monitor very closely between now and Monday. The last thing in the world we ever want to do is give advice to people that puts them in the line of danger. We very much would like to see South Africa going to work on Monday and rejecting this idea that the economy and society needs to be shut down because of the antics of the EFF. But at the end of the day, I think that assessment needs to be done over the course of the weekend with the most accurate information, so that we do not offer advice to South Africans that put them in the line of danger.
Absolutely. And there are a good few more days before Monday. So I presume lots more information will be coming forth regarding the situation on Monday, and then we can make an informed decision based on that. Michael Beaumont, National Chairperson at ActionSA, wonderful talking to you. Thank you indeed for your time.
Thank you, Julie.
Go well. It is exactly 9:56. We are standing by for our final interview of the morning, and that is with Christo van Reede, AgriSA CEO and agriculturalist. We're going to be looking at food security. Is it at risk in South Africa? What do we do to mitigate that risk? Do stay with us.